my name is Macy Bryan, and I did French farce. So French farce came from the Middle Ages. It has a tendency to make people laugh, so it was sort of vulgar. So farce basically, it comes from the French word meaning stuffing or padding. So farce doesn't have a set structure. It's sort of little pieces of comedy inserted into plays that involve the character's life. So farce started off in the 15th century, where the term was used to describe clowning and acrobatics. In plays, it usually was sort of little bits of jokery inserted into the plays. In that way, farce spread throughout Europe pretty quickly. So the origins, French farce sort of came from Greco-Roman classical comedy, or comedy in general. So Plautus and Aristophanes. It then moved on to medieval plays. These included a lot of religious plays during the Middle Ages, and then it moved on to commedia dell'arte. So commedia dell'arte was an Italian form of comedy. So outside of Italy, it was the most successful in France, and that's how it sort of infused French farce in commedia dell'arte. So elements of farce. So at odds with the environment. So this is a big part of a lot of French farce plays. So when a main character is at odds with their environment, there exists a conflict between him and the environment, and there's sort of an opposite effect. The actual nature of the gap between the main character and his or her environment is called the problem element. So then the solution to this, to restore the balance, is called the solution element. This is like the overall story or problem of most French farce plays. So physical and verbal exaggeration. This is arguably the most important part of French farce. So French farce is dominated by slapstick, which is a humor that uses a lot of physical activity. So slapstick comedy originated with commedia dell'arte, and it was actually a little object made of two pieces of wood, and they would slap it and it would make a sound, so it was sort of comedic. Farce is famous for highly choreographed door slamming, furniture tripping, and has roots in commedia dell'arte as well. So slapstick comedy has been used in a lot of different theater practices and theater genres, like pantomime, Shakespearean plays, and the Punch and Judy shows in England. So panicked action, this has a lot to do with the physical and verbal exaggeration aspect. So essentially panicked action, it's action propelled by panic, and this is in a lot of French farce plays. So I decided to compare commedia dell'arte and French farce, since French farce does come from commedia dell'arte, so there are a lot of similarities between the two. So for commedia dell'arte, there's an ensemble, meaning it's like a troupe of people, a lot of people. And then for French farce, sort of to compare in the similarity between the two, there are a lot of similar topics between French farce and commedia dell'arte, such as marriage and infidelity. So for commedia dell'arte, there are stock characters and stock situations, but for French farce, there are recognizable characters, meaning that there are like characters that are similar, but there aren't stock characters that have to be in every sort of play or situation. So for commedia dell'arte, they use improvisation, so improvised dialogue, but for French farce, it's a strict script, so they don't really deviate from what was written. So commedia dell'arte and French farce, they both use physical humor, so going back to that physical and verbal exaggeration, but emphasis on the physical. But for commedia dell'arte, they often have traveling troupes, while French farce, it's sort of distinct plays. So I also decided to compare comedy of manners and French farce, since the two are very similar, and they sort of emerge at the same time. So comedy of manners, it satirizes society's manners, while French farce is more slapstick. So in that way, comedy of manners is more high comedy, while French farce is more inferior comedy. This is also due to the physical action. So comedy of manners uses little physical action, and it focuses more on the dialogue, while French farce uses physical action once again, going back to the physical exaggeration aspect. So, playwrights. So, Feydeau and Molière, I decided to compare the two. Both are famous French farce playwrights. So, Feydeau, for both of them, I included some of their most famous plays. So, for Feydeau, I included Un Pouce à l'Oreille, and Molière, I included Tartuffe and the Misanthrope. So, Feydeau, he uses great wit and complex plots featuring misunderstandings and coincidences, while Molière is more focused on society and like class. So Feydeau is more known for his light entertainment, while Molière is mainly known for his heavier farce. That has a lot to do with the fact that Molière is known for not writing just French farce plays, but he also writes tragedies, and he is said to favor tragedies over his comedy farce plays. So that has a lot to do with the sort of darker tone with his farce plays. So modern day French farce. So I included some modern day examples. So the first picture I have is Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which came out in the 1970s. So in the movie, there's a lot of, once again, physical exaggeration, but also there is also verbal as well. It's actually relatively childlike, and the humor is relatively childlike, and it's also pretty vulgar, which makes it so funny. Another example I have is Charlie Chaplin. He's most famous for his silent movies, which was around the 1920s. So he had obviously focused more on the physical aspect since they were silent plays. He's one of the most famous, he's probably the most famous actor that focused on like the physical. So for my moment in theater, I chose The School for Wives, and I chose the character Arnolphe. So to give a bit of background, Arnolphe plans to marry this woman who is of a lower status than him, and he's essentially just talking about that. So Agnes, put your work down and listen to me. Raise your head and turn your face around. There, look at me right here and pay attention to every single note. I am going to marry you, and you ought to bless your stars 100 times a day to think of your former low status, and at the same time to wonder at the goodness in raising you from a poor little country girl to the rank of a citizen's wife. Okay, so what I sort of used in that was sort of the big gestures, so sort of the physical aspect, and then a main point in that is that it sort of focuses on the marriage aspect, or what is about marriage, which is what farce plays are usually focused on. So that's my moment in theater. But so how sort of researching French farce has affected me. It's enhanced my understanding of where French farce came from, and also comedy in general, since there is like sort of a natural progression between all the different types of comedy and theater. It also inspires ideas for my own pieces. This can actually include like even for IB, like your solo theater piece and your collaborative group project. It gives ideas, sort of the slapstick humor, and then knowledge on physical humor. It sort of gave me a background on, once again, the slapstick and the two winning sticks from Commedia dell'arte. It really just gave me a good lesson about the history of comedy and the history of French